Same old.
We're about 5 days out from UFC Fight Night 129. This will be the first event in Chile, and I can't help but think that this is the last event that people don't really care about. Nobody really cared about UFC 224, although it turned out to be a pretty good card, and I don't really think a lot of people care about this one, partially because it's thoroughly butchered. We lost Volkan versus Shogun, Usman versus Ponzinibbio, and Ray Borg versus Brandon Moreno. Those were some pretty high-profile fights, and without them, this card kind of seems like a shell of its former self. And with highly anticipated matchups in the near future, such as Stephen Thompson versus Darren Till, and obviously the extremely stacked UFC 225 card has pretty much been overshadowing everything else as of late, I can see why there's not a lot of hype behind this one in Chile, but I still do think there's some pretty good matchups, so without any further ado, let's get right into these predictions. For the first fight on the main card, we have Vincent Luque versus Chad Laprise. Don't let Vincent's record fool you. He may be 12-6, but he's won 5 out of his last 6, all by finish, and he's extremely good on the feet and on the ground. Chad Laprise most recently fought Galor Bofondo, and he eventually got the TKO victory, but he got dropped early, and I think the only reason he won that fight is because Galor Bofondo had absolutely no ground game. So Chad got dropped, Galor followed him to the ground, and Chad was able to reverse the position and get a TKO victory. Galor has since been cut from the UFC, probably because he had absolutely no ground game whatsoever. But against Vincent, Chad definitely isn't going to have a ground game advantage. So I see this fight ending early. I see Chad getting dropped just like he did against Galor Bofondo because Vincent hits really hard. He's knocked out Bilal Muhammad. So I think Vincent's going to drop Chad early and either follow him to the ground and finish it up with a submission or just TKO him right there. I do not think Chad's chin is going to hold up. And if Chad starts getting tagged on the feet and has to shoot for a takedown, I think Vincent's going to be able to lock up a darce or a guillotine. So my prediction for this fight is Vincent by early KO or submission, probably first round. For the next fight, we have Veronica Macedo versus Andrea Lee. The UFC doesn't have her pictured, but you've probably seen Andrea Lee fighting in LFA or Invicta. This is what she looks like. She kind of has that whole KGB Russian shtick going for her. So this fight I actually think is going to be one of the better ones on the card. I'm not going to say it could be fight of the night, but it could definitely be one of the best fights of the night. We have 2 top prospects going at it. Veronica has already made her UFC debut. She fought Ashley Evans Smith, and although that fight didn't go her way, she showcased that she's able to throw a lot of flashy techniques like spinning back kicks, and I definitely think she's going to incorporate that into this fight as well. Andrea Lee was supposed to make her UFC debut about 6 months ago, but she wasn't able to because she had to go through the whole USADA testing pool. In terms of this matchup, Veronica, I think, definitely has the advantage on the ground. She's a highly regarded jiu-jitsu athlete, but Andrea Lee is going to have the advantages on the feet just because she's so much physically bigger. I think she's about 3 or 4 inches taller, and she has the reach advantage as well. So I think on the feet, Andrea Lee is going to be able to win in the striking exchanges and possibly be able to avoid the takedowns. But like I said, if Veronica takes her down, I think Andrea would be in trouble. But the way I see this fight going is on the feet, Veronica tries to throw some flashy techniques and maybe even lands a couple, but Andrea will be able to stick and move with her reach advantage. I think this fight's going to go to a decision. If Veronica wins, I think it's going to be a submission victory, and if Andrea wins, I think it's going to be a decision victory. And personally, with my prediction, I think that Andrea Lee is going to be able to stick and move, win in the striking exchanges, avoid the takedowns, and win by decision. Next up, we have Diego Rivas, who is one of the only Chilean fighters on the card, versus Guido Cannetti. Guido recently fought Kyung Ho Kang, and he got tagged in that fight. He got dropped and eventually submitted. Guido's 38, and I really don't think he's UFC tier. He's won one UFC fight. He lost every fight when he was on The Ultimate Fighter. I just don't really think he needs to be in the UFC, especially at his age. I think Diego Rivas is going to walk through him personally, whether it be with a dominant decision, a KO, or a submission. Diego's the much younger guy who has a lot more potential, and I do think it's unlikely for Guido to get the victory here. I think if Diego lands a knee or a hard strike, it's gonna put Guido out. So with this fight, I think that Diego is going to have, obviously he has the youth advantage. He's going to be more durable and able to engage in a tougher fight. So with this one, I see Diego winning by a dominant decision or a KO. I think those are the two most likely outcomes. In the next fight, we have Jared Cannonier versus Dominick Reyes. Dominick is a guy that's kind of gaining a lot of hype. He's 8-0, and people are expecting him to do big things. With this fight, I think the outcome, to me at least, it seems self-explanatory. Obviously, anything in MMA can happen. But with this one, it seems like Jared Cannonier struggles with guys that are taller than him and have a longer reach than him, because then he can't really incorporate his one-punch power. Like in his last fight with Jan Blachowicz and his fight with Glover Teixeira, those are two guys that were taller than him and had a longer reach, and Jared really couldn't incorporate any part of his game plan, which would be to hit them in the face and knock them out cold. So he basically just got outstruck for 3 rounds in both of those fights and lost. With this fight, I see a similar thing happening. Dominick doesn't have a significant reach advantage. They have the same reach, but he is a lot taller. Dominick is a really tall light heavyweight, so I don't really see Jared being able to connect that much. And obviously, if he throws big looping shots trying to hit a much taller opponent, he's going to leave himself open to get tagged, which is what happened against Jan Blachowicz. So in this fight, I see it going to a decision. The only way I see Jared winning is by KO, but otherwise I see Dominick just getting the decision victory by winning the striking exchanges. And if it goes to the ground, I would give Dominick the advantage, but I don't really think this is going to go to the ground. I think this is possibly going to be a boring fight, just like the Jan Blachowicz fight was, but I do see Dominick getting the victory by decision. For the co-main event, we have Alexa Grasso versus Tatiana Suarez. I think this is going to be a good fight, but not for Alexa, because I think Tatiana could definitely be one of the top strawweights within a year or two, maybe even a champion. She has extremely dominant Olympic-level wrestling. She won the Ultimate Fighter, and in the past, Alexa has shown that she is susceptible to takedowns, like in her last fight with Ronda Marcos. I think if Alexa gets taken down one time, she's going to get controlled on the ground for the rest of the round. I don't really see how she would get up, so I do think that every round will go to Tatiana if she can secure a takedown. If Alexa does happen to tag her on the feet, she's never been knocked out before, so I think her chin would hold up enough to be able to regroup and go for another takedown. You should watch this fight with the mindset that Tatiana is the John Fitch or Khabib of the female strawweight division. I think choosing Tatiana to win is easy money, and my personal prediction is either Tatiana by submission or decision. For the main event, we have Demian Maia versus Kamaru Usman. Obviously, this is a short notice fight for Demian. I think he's coming in on either 2 or 3 weeks notice. This will also be Kamaru's first ranked opponent. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure this is his first ranked opponent, at least in the top 10. So it's a chance for him to either prove that he's worthy of being considered one of the best welterweights, or if he just needs to keep fighting unranked guys. Recently, Kamaru has been criticized for having extremely boring performances. And Demian Maia has also been criticized fairly recently in his fight with Tyron Woodley for putting on a boring performance. So when you put these two guys that are widely known as boring fighters together, well, let me get this straight. Demian Maia isn't really known as a boring fighter, but when he goes against certain styles that kind of nullify his grappling, he kind of gets boring. So Demian Maia isn't boring, but against certain styles, he can be boring. So when you take these two guys that get widely criticized for putting on lackluster performances, I think either you could get the most boring fight in UFC history, or you could get an absolute banger. I'm hoping for the latter, but with this matchup, there's definitely some key points that need to be addressed. By far, Kamaru Usman's best quality is his wrestling, and by far, Demian Maia's best quality is his jiu-jitsu and submission game. Unfortunately, for those of you that are expecting a good fight, which I am hoping for a good fight, unfortunately, I do think we're going to have a Kamaru Usman that is timid with his takedowns and not really engaging in the grappling. And I think we're going to have a Demian Maia that is waiting for a takedown and maybe not shooting for a takedown because he'll know they'll probably get stuffed. Also, this is going to be like the second time in a row that Demian Maia has gone against the same exact style. Demian Maia versus Kamaru Usman is basically Demian Maia versus Colby Covington 2.0, and I guess you could use that to say that, okay, Kamaru Usman's going to win by decision. But personally, I do think that Demian Maia was a bad matchup for Colby Covington. Colby just fought that fight pretty much perfectly. So Kamaru is also not really known for having good striking. In his last fight against Emil Meek, he lost in the striking. You can't really argue that. Emil was an unranked guy who's only had one other UFC fight, and he beat Kamaru in the striking on the feet. Demian Maia isn't necessarily known as having good striking either, but in his fight with Colby Covington, he had about a minute in the first round where he was winning the striking. So I think if Demian Maia can beat Kamaru on the feet with the striking, the judges will definitely give him the round, especially if Kamaru isn't shooting for takedowns, isn't securing takedowns. I do think that as the fight goes on, Demian Maia is going to have a little bit of a cardio problem to where maybe he does get taken down and maybe his takedown attempts don't really do anything. But I do think there's certain outcomes to the fight that just won't happen. Like, I don't think Kamaru Usman would ever win by knockout, like straight KO knockout, even though he knocked out Sergio Moraes. I mean, Demian Maia took Tyron Woodley's power. Demian Maia took an overhand right from Tyron Woodley, who's probably one of the hardest hitters in the division, and came back from it. So I don't think Kamaru is going to knock out Demian Maia. The only way I could see him getting a TKO would be if Demian was like completely gassed by the end of the third round and Kamaru got a takedown and just, you know, started ground and pounding him out like Colby Covington did at the end of their third round. But there's a ton of outcomes for this fight, and I should probably just shut up and tell you what I think could happen. If this was like a full 2-month camp for Demian Maia and it wasn't short notice, I'd be more inclined to say he wins. However, I do think that a possible outcome is when the fight starts, Demian Maia starts actually winning the striking, and Kamaru gets nervous. He's like, wow, I'm actually getting pieced up by Demian Maia right now. And he shoots for a sort of desperation takedown, and Demian is able to either get on top and incorporate his backpack jiu-jitsu and get a submission, or just get a guillotine right there. So with this one, I'm not completely confident about this, but I am going to say my prediction is Demian Maia winning by a submission in the first or second round.